Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Network with more than 4 million listeners. I'm your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Marissa Stapley. Marissa is the New York Times bestselling author of the Reese's Book Club pick, Lucky, which has been optioned for television, as well as international bestsellers The Last Resort, Things to Do When It's Raining, and Mating for Life. Her journalism has appeared in newspapers and magazines across North America. She lives in Toronto with her family, and you can follow her at marissastapley.com. Stapley's Stapley, or follow her on Instagram at Marissa Stapley. So, welcome, Marissa.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so this is my first Marissa Stapley book, The Lightning Bottles, which I absolutely loved. So before I gush, tell our listeners a little bit about The Lightning Bottles.
So The Lightning Bottles is a 90s set novel about it's kind of like an alternative grunge musical power couple named Jane and Elijah in a band called The Lightning Bottles. And Elijah goes missing at the height of their fame. And the story begins in 1999 when he's been missing for 5 years. Jane is sick and tired of being blamed for it and vilified in the media. She's taken off trying to hide in a country house in Germany. And her neighbor happens to be a Lightning Bottle super fan because they were huge, like world crazy famous. And she is convinced that Elijah is still alive and leaving Jane street art clues, like Banksy kind of art, all across the European cities where they toured. It's a mystery and it's a love story, and I'm excited that it's coming out soon.
Oh, it's so wonderful. And I feel like talk also, so I obviously it's Killer Women, so I do like to focus on the women, although there's so many amazing women in this book. Of course we have Jane, who is the superstar, who's, as you said, vilified because she's not the sort of naturally comfortable under in the limelight, and she's a songwriter, but she's not necessarily the front of the show, right? Like Elijah, and he seems to have this sort of happy-go-lucky appearance about himself when he's on stage, right? Which is an incredible talent, and she just doesn't feel that. So she's sort of basically looked at like the bitch of the couple, right? He's this wonderful. Everyone's like, why is that guy with her? And then he's missing. So what a brutal experience. So, but let's talk about Jane, because I love, so Jane's backstory also sort of, we talked about this a little bit before we started to record. There's an echo in the young girl Hen, who is the neighbor who leads Jane on the beginning of her adventure to sort of follow this art. How do characters develop for you? Like, where does it, who came first and how did it sort of happen?
So first of all, I love that you're asking me about Jane because it's so important to me that this is Jane's story. Hen too. It's not Elijah's story. I very consciously did not give him his own chapters, even though I wrote some. Oh my gosh, sorry. Hang on. Sorry about that. Okay, we can.
No, you're fine. I didn't see anything.
Okay, so somebody just tried to phone me. Anyway, so I have chapters written. I know that's how I know what he's up to or what, I know him well. But I wanted to tell Jane's story because growing up in the 90s, the male rock stars really got their stories told, and the females were either marginalized or vilified. And I accepted it at the time, and I'm just sort of even, continually realizing this happens. It happened then, it happens now, and I'm rewriting things with this book, right? I'm giving, different endings to different stories, and I want this to be Jane's story, and it's
Yeah.
important. So as far as how I came up with that character, so Jane came to me first. She was with me. She's been with me for a long time. I tried starting this novel 6 years ago, and I just couldn't figure out what the way in was. I had Jane. I did a lot of epistolary material, letters, and maybe she was writing a memoir and all of this stuff. So I have
Mhm.
like almost like a book Bible, like kind of like when Hollywood has show Bibles. Like there's so much
Yeah.
back. So I knew her really well. And sometimes I come up with a situation like with Lucky. It was the scenario with the con artist and the lottery ticket that came to me, and then Lucky came second. It's so much harder when you get a character because you're like, oh, I have this great character, but
Yes.
what am I going to
Right.
do? What are they going to do? What's happening to them? So that took some time, and I think it's when Hen came along, because again, I was looking for ways in, and the character is not an island. So who's going to be around her? And Elijah's not going to be there. So who's going to be with her? And it was my teenage self and, my teenage fan self who really inspired that because fandom is complex, right? It's beautiful, it's ugly, it's just, it makes fame possible. It turns fame into a curse, but
Yeah.
in its most, in its pure form, it really is quite a beautiful thing. And I found, for example, my fandom of Sinead O'Connor was really formative.
Mhm.
I really cared about her. And I will say, like, this is sad, but I thought about her a lot when I was writing, and I was very personally heartbroken when she passed away because I felt like she was going to read it. Like, I had this fan-like fantasy, like, she
Yeah.
read this. And so these people are in our lives, even though we're not in theirs. And
Yeah.
artists, we explore those interesting dichotomies of being human, and that's one of them. So Hen is so necessary to a story about famous people because
Yeah.
it's not a star.
No. And
Mhm.
I mean, there's so much. I think, particularly as a young, right? This, and she's so universal in the idea that as a young, and I get shivers thinking about being like a, you know 13, 14, 15-year-old kid, or 17. I guess she's 17, almost 18, right, when
Right.
in the story, but just isolated and lonely and living in a really hard situation because her mother's got some agoraphobia, and some, she's her mother, like, lived through the Berlin Wall, and she feels like she got this paranoia that was manifested from her own childhood. And so Hen is, she is a little bit of an island, right? She doesn't have the friends, and she doesn't have many outlets. So this, her love of the lightning bottles and her sort of obsession with Elijah's gone missing, which of course would be an obsession for all the fans of that band, right? But maybe not in the same way as Hen. But she feels to me like, I think every young woman, every woman is going to see a little of themselves in Hen, which I appreciate because it's a nod to sort of what we have to go through to grow up, right?
Mhm.
The sort of heartache of being, in whatever way, lonely as a young person, right? And then on the other side of that is Jane, who is, what it means to love and lose, right? I mean, and so she's this, and you see, she's been hardened, of course, by her experiences, and yet she's also still soft. There's many sort of soft sides of her, which the public doesn't get to see because the public doesn't get to see so much, right? The public sees one, you know, view of somebody, and then they make an entire story out of that one view. So, like you said, fame, a blessing and a curse, right? And so those are the two women. But I want to also talk about, Elijah's mother, who I feel like is another woman who gives, she becomes sort of a surrogate mother for Jane, and gives Jane this incredible gift of like an uncomplicated motherly love, right? Which, and in Elijah's situation, it's the dad that creates complication. But and then there's the manager, right? Their manager is like another woman, and there's all these, none of them, like, no one's perfect, but and I imagine those, those characters are also developed. Obviously, when you had Hen and Jane and Elijah, you know, what I mean, sort of again, like you all these nods to women, to the power of women, and the fact that they chose a female manager, right? You know, which was another thing probably that didn't happen that much in the actual 90s.
No, nothing, and there's a scene too where they're having the producers trot it out in front of them, and Jane's like, "You have any female
Yeah.
producers?" And not at this time. Yeah, I don't know that there, the female manager, what it was a rarity. So that was important to me. It was a really conscious choice. So yeah, I'm glad that you noticed that. And, motherhood. I mean, Elijah's mother, like, you know, when I think about the inspirations for Elijah, like Kurt Cobain or Jeff Buckley and their mothers, are complex characters in real life, right? And they lost their sons and they had these complicated sons and complicated relationships and whether, for various reasons. So I found myself really interested in that and what exactly that would look like and, how someone can end up um with the baggage that Elijah has,
Yeah.
but still have that like soft place and that unconditional love. But there's that scene where Jane's with Alice and they're having this beautiful talk, but like Alice is stoned out of her mind, like
Yeah.
it's just there's that complication. So yeah, every character is so important. Even Elijah's, ex Sean, like it was important to me. It's
Yeah.
there's this women against women in the 90s. It's even now, like it's, Kim really likes to try to play that up. And
Yes.
I think, Jane wanted at the very beginning, she looked at those girls in Seattle and was like, the look at them like tangled up like kittens, like hanging out, braiding each other's hair. Like, how does that work? And
Yeah.
those, the beauty of female friendship, but what it can look like from the outside for someone who doesn't understand it. So yeah, like
Right. Or
relationships are
who isn't included. Like she wasn't taken into the fold. And she might have been had she, she's not somebody who is super flexible in how she presents, right? She wasn't going
oh,
to like, get down on the beanbag and sort of like fall into the fold. This wasn't her. That's not who she is. And Kim, who is the Elijah's oldest best friend. So Kim's a man, just for those people who haven't read the book yet, which you have to do because it's so fabulous. But that's a really another complicated, not to diminish the male aspects of it. That's another hugely complicated relationship with in Elijah's life who that really Kim makes it very hard for Jane to accept him and like him, right? He's just and yet he's somebody who's in Elijah's life and has had a really meaningful influence and it's complicated, right? It's complicated like all long friendships are complicated.
yeah,
So
they are. And also like female friendships are so different than male friendships. I think that's changing now, but I think I wanted to explore that too, right? That idea that there's this loyalty that's very interesting,
yes.
but it's like loyalty, even though maybe it's not deserved, and it can be very alienating for the female in your life to be like, well,
Yeah.
this person not very nice to me, and yet like he's your brother, and
Yes.
that I definitely endured like in the 90s with, boyfriends, and you just the stuff that you would put up with that I would
uh
never want my up with or my son or anyone to have to put up with that because there was this very like serious undercurrent of sexism, I think in all of the eras. The 90s certainly were not singular.
Mm-mm.
uh, anyway, yeah, so the relationships, they're all so important. They're so real, they feel very real to me. But yeah, the women are really really important. And yeah, this is Jane and Hen's story, really.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it is interesting to sort of go to I mean, I think as you said, you were looking for ways in. So Hen's, the way that you enter the story through Hen's perspective makes, such sense because it's also, and then you go, and then the story goes back and forth between the current, 1999 and the way they got their start and Jane as a young person and the way she found Elijah on like, one of those, I can picture it as like a chat group, like a, DOS or whatever it was, it was like a black
Totally. Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. So my brother had set one of those up, and I remember like chatting with people on those, and yeah, it was the whole thing that like we're so used to it now, but it was not something we were used to then. So
They would have, I mean, they would never have found each other, right? I mean, he was in Seattle and she was in Canada. And so there's just there's, they change each other's trajectory. So it's interesting that you said you had this idea a long time ago. Um, and so is that how books work for you? Do you have like some seed of an idea that you sort of pick out in the back of your mind, or you let it, you know, is that typical for a book to take sort of years to sort of come to a place where it's ready to be written?
I mean, at that up to that point, it wasn't really like normally I would come up with an idea and then just try to run with it. But I had had an experience previously, where I had an idea and I tried to run with it and I got about halfway and it didn't work. So I was feeling cautious. I had spoken with my agent about this idea for the lightning bottle. She loved it. But then what ended up happening is my mom got really sick and I
Mm.
was trying to write the lightning bottles and it was too dark and too complex. And the Lucky idea came to me around that time and then the idea for Lucky. And so I decided to pursue that because it felt more manageable
Yeah,
emotionally.
yeah,
um, that's what happened there, and I mean, I'm so it was a heartbreaking, very challenging time in my life. I'm so glad that I got to choose Lucky because Lucky changed my life and ultimately
yes.
has provided, a huge comfort in my grief because my mom did end up passing away.
I'm
I
sorry.
could never have taken on the lightning bottles through any of that.
Right.
And I also think that sadly, I probably couldn't have written it the way that I do, having not lost someone yet.
Yeah.
Because understand like that, and there are some people who will probably say like, how could you forgive someone for like taking off on you? And there's a lot of stuff here, but if you've lost someone, you know that like you would give anything to
Have
have
them
them back,
back.
right?
Yeah,
So
right.
it's
And
not forgive you.
exactly. And I also think that you know, there's a there is something, I mean, they came together so young, right? They were so young that I
Yeah.
also think there was something that they each had to learn, right? And I think it's like almost like in that situation, there was no way forward without that. I think
Oh,
that was what, right. I think that,
I
and
think
that's true, I think, of a lot of parts of our lives, right?
oh, for sure. And I think, that I'm glad you said that too, like about the things they had to learn, because characters have to go on journeys, right? They can't be perfect at the beginning. With Elijah, for me, it was a very conscious choice that, he was young. They were both young. He is not perfect. He is that guy who you maybe shouldn't have been dating, who you wanted to fix. And
Mm,
most of the time, those relationships don't work out, but you can feel what it felt like to love that person, even though they were.
yeah,
So, like, Elijah really needed to grow up.
yeah,
And um yeah, like that's important. And in terms of like the only solution like to their relationship being, this kind of brutal situation that they end up in, all my research on addiction led me to the fact that it is an impossible situation in almost every case.
yeah,
Particularly 90s, there was no way out for so many. And I think that was almost part of the seed of the novel. Like, what if Kurt Cobain had just actually, gone and like lived in the middle of Alaska somewhere for 10 years? Like,
yeah,
what if Jeff Buckley just pretended to drown, because they were both in prisons. Kurt Cobain, it was addiction. Jeff Buckley, I think it was more mental
yeah,
illness, that weird prison of fame.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, which
so
I mean, it is to just think about, it's funny because, I mean, we're touched by sort of like being known in some really small way when you write a book. But the idea of like being on stage, like whether you're an actor or a singer, I mean, or a part of a band, that is like, it hits every like nerve in me to imagine what that would be like. It just sounds like hell. And I know people crave it, they really want it. But, um,
until
I
they
just
get
think.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
think
that
that's right.
I really think I know I spoke to many people in the music industry and this kind of high level record producer I looked at once. I said something like, I think fame is a curse. And he looked at me and he was like, Marissa, fame is a curse. Like, you've got it. It is like, and the look in his face was just like, it's serious. Like, it's not, it's crazy. The price you pay as a performer
Yeah,
with your art. Oh my gosh. Like it's stunning to me how,
yeah,
what famous people endure and how it's just expected. Like,
yeah. We're supposed to have access to all aspects of them, right?
and like Taylor Swift, I mean, she's just the performance that she delivers in every area of her life is
Oh,
just,
yeah,
oh my gosh, like it's terrifying to me. And I'm in sort of humbled admiration that she's pulling it off, right? But
right. Yeah, and I think that's people want it and they, and so people pursue it and that's all they can think about. And then like you said, there's no going back, right? Like you think about like, people saying, "Oh, it won't change me and my life won't change that much." And then I mean, you can't be Brad Pitt and, go do anything normal in your life. I mean, well, speaking of famous people, let's talk about Reese because you had sort of that magical experience with Lucky, and where it was a Reese pick, and she seems, I mean, talk about an incredible woman. I'm so impressed with everything she's done for women and reading and books. Tell us what that was like. What happened? How did you get the call? How loud did you scream? Share us.
And she's a very interesting example of a person who's taken her fame and tried to, like, I see her as, actively trying to do good in the world and make a difference and use her fame for that. And she does, and she takes incredible pleasure. I know this personally. Like, I know how much it means to her to change the lives of her authors. Like, I'm sitting here
Yeah,
in this college. I have it because of her. I told
yeah.
her, she really, that's what that's a big part of who she is. Like, she really is who she appears. So yeah, the moment that I found out, I guess it was around this time. How many years ago now? I'm starting like 2 years ago. I was at a cottage rental and my agent sent me a message saying, I'd like to have dinner with you because I never got to see you personally when you launched Lucky in Canada because it was COVID and I had like a Zoom launch and
Yeah,
nice. And honestly, the book had released in Canada. It had done okay, but not great. Like I had such high hopes and also because it
yeah,
was that I wrote and when my mom had been unwell and then she passed away and I wasn't feeling amazing about stuff.
yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'll go for this dinner. And I got back to the city and I walked to the restaurant. Somehow, by the way, managed to get the time wrong and be like a full half an hour late too. So
Oh,
like was texting me and she was like, are you coming? And I just was like, oh God, this is like I just was feeling actually pretty low. I'm like, I can't even get the time right. And I was standing at the lights to cross to the restaurant and I could see my agent sitting there with my editor. And I didn't realize, and my editor, by the way, is Nita Pronovo, otherwise known as Nita Prose. She's no
yes.
longer publishing. She's now just an author, but she was sitting there and I thought, oh, I didn't know Nita was coming. And then I started to get weirdly tearful. I was like, this is like weird that I didn't like why it's weird.
Right. Like
So,
they're
and
firing me.
yeah, right. I was like,
Something weird
uh-oh,
like that, right?
something weird. And then so I got to the table, started babbling nervously, and there was champagne. And I was like, okay, this, and again, like I'm catastrophizing. Like, is this they're trying to like, am I getting fired with champagne? What is happening? Um, so so then Samantha, my agent, said, Nita wants to tell you something really important. And she started videoing with her phone. And at that point, I did think, okay, it would be really bizarre if something
Yeah.
bad were happening and they were going to fire me.
Oh, right.
So we have this all on video. So Nita very clearly says, this is extremely confidential, really big news about the US release of Lucky. It's the Reese's Book Club pick for December. And in the video, like I just immediately do what you did. Like I just go and I just started crying. And I love watching it because I was completely like elated and emotional but I
I have
wasn't
shivers. Yeah.
like who me? Like because I worked really hard up until that point.
Yeah.
It wasn't, that was my fourth novel and so so I wasn't like, oh, I don't deserve this. I was just like, oh my God, I'm so grateful. And like, oh,
Yeah.
thank just, and also this book of my heart, of my, with what I wrote with my mom, it felt really like that too,
Yeah.
because I was able to share it with her when she wasn't well. She loved it. It kind of kept her going a bit. So it was the most beautiful, beautiful thing. It was great.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
really just, and Nita said, everything will change at this point, and it has, it has changed. It completely changed everything. And so yeah, it was a really beautiful moment. Yeah.
That's
And
amazing.
it's actually on my Instagram, like below. I think that I have it as like the moment kind of pinned to the top, so you can watch it. It's really
Go. Absolutely. How
go watch
fun.
it because it is, yeah, it's a really, I carry that with me. It really is beautiful. And yeah, I mean, Reese, she does this. It's something that she does. It's not just me, right? It's once a month, and she's coming up to her 100th pick, and I'm so excited. That's next month. And the things that she has been able to make happen, because it is hard. You're an author, like it's a tough
Yeah.
industry. There are ups, there are downs.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually, there are still ups and downs for me,
I
like,
know. Right.
so yeah, that was the
But it is a magical thing. And I actually also, I mean, which, we're talking about women. And I actually kind of also love that she chooses women, that it's
Mhm.
like a way, that it's a way to sort of tip, the hat to like, to sort of her own experience as a woman, and then to the women who create these stories about women largely, right? These are stories about, I mean, they're stories about humans, men and women, but I think there's at the core of each of those, it seems to me that there's a woman, right, who is um you know, talking about something that feels very real and universal. And so that is the most exciting thing. I can't even imagine that. So it's such the dream, right? It's and yeah, I mean, so basically, did you find that then, like, you said everything changes because everybody wants to read every book you've ever written. So they go back and they read them all. But I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, the main thing, I mean, many things have changed. Like I said, I have the cottage boot, my husband and I, that was always our dream to have a big house. Something, I used to dread like going to parties. My husband's, in IT, and we'd go to like corporate parties, and people are like, "What do you do?" And
uh,
then I'm an author.
right. Yeah,
Have
right.
I read anything of yours? I'm like, probably not. Like, I don't. So now I can go to parties. I'm like, I'm an author. And then when I say lucky, like everyone's like, oh, I've read that. Like it feels so that changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, the interest in my backlist has been great. A lot of my projects have been optioned. And of course, like you can never talk about this stuff, but there are things that are looking really good. There. So yeah, that, and just yeah, the number of books that I sell
Yeah.
has, yeah.
I mean, it's certainly a great negotiating, point for the future novels, right? I think that's amazing. Well, that is it, and I think if there's something, if you believe in sort of kismet and the universe, there's something else really special about the fact that your mom, you know,
Yeah.
saw, right? She saw that from wherever, right?
I'm sorry, my cats have just started like having a serious fight. So if you start
That's
hearing crazy, like, they're silent so far, but like
this. I don't. Yeah, exactly. I don't hear them yet. So
Yeah, so yeah. Yes, no, I think there is that, right? And that idea of kismet, like I think I I explore that a lot. Like I think it happens in life, right? It happens, these things do happen. And I know that it was my tenacity and my hard work and all of that stuff to let that has led to where I am. But there is this feeling like there's magical elements to it. And I needed that. I needed to believe in the world again at that point.
yeah.
So yeah.
And does the
Mhm.
imposter syndrome still come back at the beginning of every book?
Oh yeah, like you're just completely. And I don't, people do ask like, "Oh, are you nervous because this is the follow-up to Lucky and there's expectation?" I
Oh,
think good thing, I've not ever felt that way about the lightning bottles because I was writing it before, and
yeah.
Beatles actually felt like the novel I always really wanted to write. That was the
Mhm.
other thing. Like I was a mid-career author, I was doing okay. So I was a little nervous, like, will I be able to write the lightning bottles? So that's one thing that changed with
Yeah.
is that I was able to write it. So no, it always felt like a big important book. So I'm glad I had it kind of in the hopper. But
Yeah.
always, yeah, I think you're doing something wrong if you don't have a moment of like, do I know how to do this? Should I just be a barista? Like at some point in the
Yeah.
process,
Right.
I'm
Right.
actually really bad at this. So yeah, I think I wish I could get rid of imposter syndrome, but I wonder what kind of a person I would look like if I didn't have a little bit of it, just making me strive constantly to improve my craft and myself.
I think you can sometimes read the authors who've lost it. I think you can kind of sense who they are. And I don't know that it really does do us any benefit to not have it. I think,
Yeah.
knowing that you have to work a little harder each time and is probably good. It's probably good for us. So I agree. And actually, I interviewed Sandra Brown, who has whatever 135 New York Times bestsellers, and she said every time she starts a book, she looks at the bookshelf and says, "Okay, I've done this. I can do this again." And then she just spent a few minutes like really sort of angsting over whether or not she actually can do it again. So I think it's universal,
Yeah.
and I think I think it's great. Can you tell us quickly what that you're working on something new and anything about it? Is it still I get it when it's
Yeah, well, I don't know if you know this about me, but I also write holiday rom-coms under a pseudonym. Like
I
so,
did not know that. Tell us that.
so I actually have 2 books coming out this fall. I have a book called The Holiday Honeymoon Switch coming out as Julia McKay. I love doing that because it kind of is a little bit of a pressure release on my other books.
Totally.
I love writing. I have, kind of a not so secret love of holiday rom-coms. And during COVID, I actually co-wrote with another author a couple of holiday rom-coms and just to kind of cheer ourselves up. And I've kept on doing that. So I'm actually in the midst of writing another holiday rom-com for release in 2025. And it's just like such a palate cleanser and it's so fun and
I
it's
was just
romantic.
thinking, yeah, it sounds like a palate cleanser, and I actually think there's something plus the collaboration element, which I think I also am part of a group that is writing a funny mystery set on a pig farm in Iowa, and just the idea that when you write something really like I do too, that's dark and heavy, and
Mm.
that you get this little, like you said, little pressure release where you get to laugh
Yeah.
and that camaraderie in any way you can find it. Right, we're such a lonely business. This writing thing. So I can totally understand that. And that's super fun. Tell us the name again. You write
So
those
the one
under
coming out this October I write is Julia McKay, and
okay.
it's Holiday Honeymoon Switch. So yes, and then I have 2 ideas right now for what my next Marissa Stapley novel will be, and I
Uh-huh.
don't know yet.
Yeah.
I think I need to let those.
Yeah.
Uh, I always imagine them kind of up here doing
Yeah,
whatever.
percolating, right,
Yeah,
exactly. No, that's
yeah,
amazing. Well, I and I there's actually the thing we didn't talk about is there's some really wonderful nods to some real famous people too, which I really appreciated in the lightning bottles. And I just devoured it. And um congratulations. I think people are going to love it. I can't wait to go back and read, Lucky, which I haven't read. Somehow I missed it in, whatever, whenever it came out. But I'm really excited to dig into it. And I think it's amazing. It's so fun to talk to you, Marissa. This was what a special treat. So,
thanks. Enjoyed it too, and I'm gonna look for your work now too. So yeah,
well, thank you. That's really sweet of you. Everybody, you can find Marissa on she had a website, Marissa Stapley is Stapley.com or under that same name on Instagram. And do not miss the lighting bottles. This is going to be one of my favorite picks for 2024. So thank you for joining me today, everyone. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time. Bye.
thank you.